Was it really an imminent threat to the United States?
Dislike of Trump makes them think, okay, this is a great advantage to us. What we want to see is him fail, which would, of course, in this respect, be the failure of the country.
Oppose, oppose, oppose. We were against it. This is going to work out the same way Iraq did.
It was very explicit, very clear that he was saying, we are not going to be the ones who installs your new government. That's up to you.
European alliance, the North Atlantic alliance, I don't think he's destroying that, but he is recasting it.
Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. And I am joined by Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent. And Byron, you and I have talked on Political Perspectives a few times in the past weeks about the possibility and the probability of the coming war with Iran, and now we're in the middle of it. What we've had already, and it's only, I think we're into day 5, Israel and the United States have operations which have killed the supreme leader along with 50 senior leaders or so, about that sort of number, including the top of the Revolutionary Guards, the top of the army. Much of Iran's navy is at the bottom of the sea, as President Trump so pithily put it a couple of days ago. And we saw for the first time just today an American submarine sank an Iranian frigate somewhere off Sri Lanka. And it's the first time in, I don't know, since the Second World War or so, that an American submarine has sunk an enemy naval ship, a warship. And we have seen unprecedented integration, not just cooperation, integration of the Israeli and American forces cooperating together. So an enormous amount has happened in those days, but one of the things, and you could say that the operations seem to be going pretty well, very well. But one of the things that you and I talked about in the past was that Trump had not made the case for the war domestically to America. And there's this degree of trouble about the case that is now being made, and confusion at least. So talk about, like, we can say we were right, he should have made the case better. What's going on as far as making the case and convincing domestic audience?
Yeah, well, as we speak, there have just been some briefings on the 100-hour mark here. So we're still very early, 4 days into it. As far as the rationale and the explanation for going to war, the administration has been a little bit unsure of itself, even as the military operations have been going with apparently great precision and effectiveness. So the question is, the biggest question I think actually came out at that 2 a.m. video on Saturday morning when President Trump released the video announcing it, that hostilities had begun, and he said that the United States was countering an imminent threat from Iran. And Democrats immediately said, including Democrats who had access to intelligence, said, what's the imminent threat? There was no imminent threat. And then for the last couple of days, the administration has been kind of going around about what the imminent threat was. And Marco Rubio went to Capitol Hill, and we should say the administration has apparently kept the intelligence leaders and the leaders on Capitol Hill well informed about this stuff.
Right.
Goes to Capitol Hill and said, here's the imminent threat. We knew that the Israelis were going to attack. And we also knew that when the Israelis attacked, Iran would respond by attacking the United States. Therefore, we faced an imminent attack.
Right.
And if we had, with this knowledge, if we had just waited for that to play out, we would have taken greater casualties than if we attacked ourselves preemptively.
Right.
So that's the explanation. Now, some of Trump's MAGA base, it's a pretty small anti-war part of the MAGA base. Many of them have podcasts. has said, well, look, so basically Israel dragged the United States into war here. I don't think that's the case because the United States in pretty much all of these operations has been the senior partner, as it should be, being about 1,000,000 times bigger and stronger. But what really happened, I do think, was kind of a coordinated operation where you do this, then we'll do this. We know this. It was a
Right.
plan. So the plan worked out that way. Was it really an imminent threat to the United States? Well, it was after Israel attacked with full knowledge and approval of the United States.
Right. I think that one of the disputes, or the dispute, I think the word imminent is obviously crucial here, and it's not one of those words which you can give a meaning that there's a precise measurement of what imminence means. It means it's hanging over you. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ayatollah's finger is on the button and you have to wait until that point. In fact, we know very well that you don't have to wait. So does the fact that Iran has enough enriched uranium to build 11 nuclear bombs, as they boasted and Witkoff revealed, or does the accumulation of ballistic missiles, has it reached a point that makes the threat imminent? I don't know whether imminence means, today, next week, next month, or even in 6 months' time. And I think that that's an area where one can have dispute. But to go to the way that this is playing out domestically, there's a real sense, to me at least, that the Democrats are playing this, choosing party, choosing perhaps party over country in this. There's a tone to what they're saying which makes them look like and sound like they're rooting for failure here, that their dislike of Trump makes them think, okay, this is a great advantage to us. What we want to see is him fail, which would, of course, in this respect, be the failure of the country. And they're using, it was on Monday. The war was less than 3 days old, certainly hardly more than 2 days old. And you had both Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, and Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, using the same phrase about endless war. It was 48 hours old. So they seem to be pinning their hopes to opposition to this war. It seems to me quite a political calculation and quite a bad look. What do you think?
Well, first of all, it's just muscle memory. The Democrats are going to attack anything Donald Trump does. If Trump does it, they're against it. The second thing is, this is particular to the Democratic Party. In 2002 and early 2003, George W. Bush made a detailed case over and over again for an invasion of Iraq. And there was a congressional authorization vote. And a lot of the big Democrats at the time voted to authorize the war in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
That included people like John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. Senior Democratic senators voted to authorize this war. Okay, so it went badly. The war went badly. The U.S. did not find the weapons of mass destruction. Things got worse and worse and worse. Now, that became a factor in Democratic politics. And in the 2008 election, the Democratic primaries, the candidates who had voted in favor or to authorize Bush to go to war suffered for that vote and faced a lot of criticism. And one of the reasons that Barack Obama was able to skate by the whole thing was that he had not been in the Senate at that time and did not have to vote on it, and could say, well, I never would have voted to authorize that war.
Right.
So anyway, Democrats have this in their memory. And so they think, oppose. We were against it. This is going to work out the same way Iraq did, and we will be in the right place politically.
Yeah. One of the other phrases about the kind of war which people support or oppose is the concept of regime change war. And this was something that you and I have discussed before, that the president, during his election campaigning, has talked about not getting in either to endless wars or regime change wars. I think one of the things, there's been a deliberate element of confusion thrown into the debate here, and that's, I guess, politics. But one of the things that I think has been very clear from the, even though the United States and Israel have gone after the leadership, they've eliminated, as we said, the supreme leader and a lot of other leaders. One of the things that President Trump made absolutely plain in his televised address in the small hours of Saturday morning was that he said to the Iranian people, he said, shelter inside, there's going to be a lot of bombs falling, it's very dangerous. When we have finished, take over your government. In other words, it was very explicit, very clear that he was saying, we are not going to be the ones who installs your new government. That's up to you. So there has been, has there not, an attempt to suggest that somehow that has been part of the aim, when in fact Marco Rubio and various others, including President Trump right at the beginning, have said, look, if the regime falls, that's something we very much approve of, but that is not the goal. The goal is protecting American citizens from the imminent threat of nuclear war or nuclear bombs, missiles, the Navy, and terrorists. So although that people have been talking about regime change war, am I right in saying, as I believe I am, that the administration, that Trump, the president, and everyone down has been very plain that their goal is not that? That might be a very good, advantageous thing that flows from this.
Well, I would actually approach it a little bit differently than that. When Trump released that video in the early hours of Saturday, what he knew at that time, and we did not know, was that we had essentially decapitated the entire Iranian government, the entire regime. And actually, he said in his own classically Trumpian way in the Oval Office yesterday that as far as who might replace all of the leaders who've been killed by Israeli and American munitions. He said, well, there are about 40 of them we had in mind, but they're all dead. And, we had in mind another group, and I think they're going to be all dead too. And then he started talking about Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And it was actually quite interesting. He said, the thing about Venezuela was we had people in the government, the vice president, who decided, they looked at their own self-interest and said, they think they'll cooperate with the United States. And we had a government we could deal with. And with Iran, we're dealing with religious fanatics and killing them all. And I don't know what's going to be there. And it was pretty clear from listening to the president in the Oval Office that he doesn't know that either. So you can say, well, regime change is not our goal. However, we've decapitated your entire government, and we encourage you, once it's safe, to go out in the streets and agitate for a new government, and the composition of the government will be announced later.
Right, right. I want to broaden what we're looking at here to what I think is an extraordinary thing that we're witnessing here, and that is the extent to which President Trump is changing the landscape of the Middle East. Now, of course, to some extent, or to perhaps a great extent, that depends on the success of this operation. But I don't think that one can look at the attack on Iran by itself. You have to go back to the first Trump administration and look at the Abraham Accords, which drew in several countries, Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, and others, Bahrain, into the Abraham Accords, which was recognition of Israel. What you have right now is Iran lashing out at other nations, including Saudi Arabia, which would be the big one to get into the Abraham Accords. And it seems to me that what we're seeing in this war is a further reshaping of the Middle East landscape by President Trump, integration with and the creation of alliances there that, if successful, will allow the United States to remove itself to some extent from the Middle East. But this is the landscape of the Middle East, the strategic landscape of the Middle East is being dramatically changed, and President Trump began dramatically changing it in his first administration. So this is kind of a long-term strategic project that we're seeing part of right now, isn't it?
I do think that's exactly right. And as you started speaking, I was thinking about the Abraham Accords. And the Abraham Accords and this war share one similarity, even though they're using wildly different means, and that is to isolate the bad guys in the Middle East. So that if you can encourage Israel and various countries in the Middle East to deal with each other, to do business with each other, to recognize each other's existence, then you are isolating those groups that don't. And that was going to be a huge thing. As you point out, had Trump been reelected in 2020, I think Saudi Arabia would have joined the Abraham Accords. Now I think they will do it at some point, maybe in the not terribly distant future. What we've seen with this attack on Iran, and that I think surprised some people, was Iran just starts firing missiles all over the Middle East,
Right.
not just at Israel and not just at American air bases, but all sorts of other countries. I think mostly Sunni Muslim countries, all sorts of other countries, and isolating itself.
Right.
In the Middle East. So you've kind of isolated the bad actor, and everybody else wants the bad actor to go away.
Right.
So that is a huge, what we call change the facts on the ground action.
Yeah, and I think that there's a kind of further aspect which is sort of global about this. It's not just changing the regional picture, but we're also seeing this war accelerating the change of alliances in Europe. You know, President Trump is very cross with Britain and France, which denied it the use of their sovereign bases for offensive operations against Iran. And we've seen him talk about Spain as well. It seems that the old alliances in Europe, the supposed special relationship with Britain in particular, kind of crumbling. But you had the German Chancellor in the Oval Office just yesterday, and Germany has been very staunch with Israel and allowed its bases to be used in this operation. And you see that American alliances with Europe, he's seeing Poland is very staunch, Germany is very staunch, even Portugal. There's quite a shift taking place, and it's kind of resolving who are the really close friends here, isn't it?
I think it has, including some of our friends with whom we thought we had a special relationship.
Right.
Gee, I thought we had a special relationship. And you're absolutely right about that. And this is also, you have to view it in a piece with a lot of Trump's pressures on NATO, on the nations to contribute more to their own defense and that sort of stuff. And Trump, I don't think, is destroying the European alliance, the North Atlantic alliance. I don't think he's destroying that, but he is recasting it, and he is rebalancing it. And some of that is being done by the countries themselves. So when Britain says you cannot use these bases, we think, okay, we'll figure out other bases to use, but we will remember this.
Yes.
So I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, and if you've got Europe looking after itself or shouldering more of the burden for security on the eastern side of the Atlantic, and you've got this growing and sort of integrating alliance with the United States, Israel, and the sort of more moderate Arab countries in the Middle East, and I hear that the Saudis are reassuring people in Washington that they will be joining the Abraham Accords. It's just the timing is the thing. Then conceivably you've got America somewhat released to actually face the biggest foe that we have, which is China, and to do the thing which presidents throughout the past generation have been saying, right back at least to Clinton, have been saying is important, and that is a pivot to the Western Pacific and China. So I think that we're just seeing an enormous strategic change here. And that leads me to my last question, Byron. because sometimes one can turn almost too quickly to domestic politics. You say, oh, here's this vast change taking place in the strategic structures and arrangements in the world, and that's just so big substantively that you kind of almost don't want to say, well, okay, but how does it affect the midterm elections? But Byron, how does this all affect the midterm elections?
Well, yeah, I remember writing, it was in early December. Trump, there was this growing feeling that Trump was elected to fight inflation and to raise the standard of living and to focus on the economy. And even then, he was talking about being the president of peace, and he ended 8 wars, and he did all this stuff. And there was a feeling among some in his base that he was not devoting enough attention to the economy. So by December, with the midterms looming less than a year away, the White House starts talking about, well, we're really going to focus on the economy. The president's going to start holding rallies out around the country in strategic places, talking about the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And then in January, he goes into Venezuela.
Right.
Okay, and that takes a lot of attention, and also kind of indicates maybe his priorities. And then now he's done something much, much bigger, which is the attack on Iran. So your question, okay, when is he going to talk about the economy? My feeling is the conventional view is that he should be talking about the economy right now. And he's, unless American troops are involved, which they are right now, Americans don't care much about foreign policy. And they will be very happy to not have to care about this Middle Eastern situation again as soon as possible. So he needs to get to the conventional view. He needs to get to the economy as soon as possible. I think the Trump White House views it in a slightly different way, which is the things the president has done, which they believe very strongly will improve the economy this year. That is the measures passed in the big beautiful bill, the bigger tax refunds coming, the no tax on tip, all this kind of stuff. Things that they believe will improve the economy are on the way. They're coming. They're set. They're going to happen. And so that is what I think the White House case for success in the midterms is really built on. So the president can remake the world while at the same time he has already set in structure, set in place the measures that are going to improve the economy. Now, is that going to work? I don't know, but I think that's the way they view it right now.
We'll have you back next week, and you can tell us whether it has worked or not, Byron.
Yes, we'll give the final answer. Yes.
Thanks very much for joining me, Byron. We'll see you again, I hope, next week. And thank you all for joining us on Political Perspectives. Remember, like and subscribe to YouTube, our YouTube channel, and we'll see you again next time.